United Nations says shortages of funding threaten providing assistance to millions of Yemenis nationwide. Recent local rights organization reveals Houthi militia violations in 2021. Government forces inflict considerable losses on rebels in Ma'rib and liberate new areas. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. The United Nations said that 13,000 people were displaced again last month in the governorates of Shabwa, Ma'rib, Taiz, and Hodeidah. With the escalation of hostilities, a recent United Nations report warned against the pressures that the ongoing displacement is adding to the humanitarian partners, who are already facing severe funding hardships. More details are in the following report.
The shortage in funding poses a serious threat to Yemeni people's lives. Millions of Yemeni's most vulnerable people are at risk of losing critical aid due to a lack of funds. Due to budget constraints, about two-thirds of major United Nations aid programs had already been reduced or closed as of January. Unless more funding is promptly secured, more cuts are expected in the following months. Food aid is being reduced at a time when hunger is at an all-time high. Only 2 million people would receive full rations by March, while 11 million will be forced to rely on reduced food rations. Water and sanitation services in 15 major cities would be cut off soon, affecting 4.6 million people. More than 1 million women and girls will lose access to reproductive health and gender-based violence services in the near future. Millions more people are at risk of losing access to crucial services, including healthcare, nutrition, shelter, monetary assistance, and education. The United Nations states that more needs to be done in the long run to sustainably reduce humanitarian needs, including coordinated efforts to strengthen Yemen's economy. In the meanwhile, urgent funding is required to keep the humanitarian operation running and prevent a spike in people's suffering.
A delegation from the World Food Programme visited with IDPs camps in Aden. It was briefed on the human suffering experienced by the displaced as well as the basic and humanitarian services provided to them. Officials listened to the requirements and suggestions for sustainable solutions for the IDPs and stressed the necessity of the return to liberated and safe areas. The suffering of the displaced continues to increase day by day, especially during this cold weather in winter, when families don't have enough supplies for shelter or to keep them warm, leaving the displaced people to suffer more and more from the bitterness and the pain of displacement during war. More details on the suffering of the displaced people in Al Dala are within the following report.
Rooms without furniture that protect them from the cold of the winter, and a small kitchen with no supplies or food. This is the case of the family of the citizen Abdullah Nu'man, who was displaced to Wadi Shaddad neighborhood in Qataba city in Al Dala. His wife tells the story of her family's heartburn and pain after her husband kept struggling to find food and rent for the apartment in which they live. He suffered a sudden stroke, leaving her with her 6 children to face the difficult life of displacement and its pain.
We are displaced. My husband is sick. He has a heart problem. And we moved to this apartment without any furniture or supplies. I have 6 children and my husband is really sick.
As for the citizen Razaz Abdu Khamis, who was displaced to the city of Qa'taba, who returns to his tent after spending hours searching for work that would generate any amount of money for him to buy food for his family members, but is not successful. Many displaced families live in the same conditions, complain of poverty and deprivation, and suffer from problems in shelter, food, health, and education amid limited assistance provided by humanitarian organizations.
I search for work, but I cannot find anything. I have 8 children. We have no blankets in this cold weather, no furniture, no food, nothing. I go outside every day to work, but I get nothing and return back with empty pockets.
Behind these walls and inside these dilapidated tents, there are stories that tell of endless daily suffering for a large number of displaced families in Al-Dala. The hours of their day are divided between memories of the hell of war, distance from home, the bitterness and the pain of displacement, and difficult conditions.
In Hadramaut, a displaced woman who tasted the bitterness of homelessness insisted on making success. She transformed her tent into a school to eradicate the illiteracy of the displaced families. More details are in the context of the following report.
After she suffered the bitterness of displacement, she and her family settled in Hadramaut Governorate, fleeing the hell of war that was ignited 7 years ago by the Houthi militia in her hometown in Hajjah Governorate. Saida Thawab is a mother of a displaced family who knows well the meaning of displacement and homelessness. She turned her modest tent into a voluntary school to eradicate illiteracy of the displaced families.
I started teaching in the governorate of Hajjah. Then we were displaced to Hudaydah governorate. I used to teach male and female students, and afternoon I used to give literacy classes. When we came here, we started teaching these classes. Some of the students here were not accepted in the official schools for their old age. So I accepted them here, fearing that they would forget all about education. I have here students aging 15, 20, and 30 years old, in addition to one student in her 50s.
The small tent became a beacon of light. In this tent, women and children came to Saida in order to learn how to read and write. She started teaching them the alphabet and the basics of writing, something the governmental institutions were not able to do. The tent school is a place for learners from all age categories, people enrolled hoping that they will have the foundations of education.
Before, I didn't know anything. Now, thank God, we started to know the letters, words, math, and how to open the phone. We have benefited a lot from these classes. We are able now to educate our children. When our children come from school, we can review with them their lessons. The educated mother can educate her children now.
Education in Hadramaut is lacking the basic necessities, and government schools are overcrowded, especially with many displaced people. Other displaced students were also forced by war to leave school, as they have been forced before to leave their homes and move from their hometowns.
The Yemeni Network for Rights and Freedom revealed a number of Houthi violations against civilians during 2021. The report indicated that the Houthi militia committed 1,134 cases of kidnapping, enforced disappearances, and torture of detainees, and making them human shields, including women and children. The report pointed out that the crimes of torture varied, stressing that the Houthi militia committed shocking crimes against detainees, which amounted to sexual exploitation and rape. The terrorist Houthi militia continues to force the popular leaders in the capital Sana'a to mobilize more elements in its ranks. Media sources reported that the militia had given a last warning to the popular leaders to recruit about 7,500 people in order to support their collapsed fronts in Ma'rib and in the western coast. Military sources said that the government forces launched a sweeping attack during which they liberated several areas in west of Ma'rib. A source confirmed that the attack also resulted in the killing and wounding of dozens of Houthi elements in the front of Mas, while the forces recovered medium and light weapons in quantities of Houthi ammunition. In addition, the artillery of the government forces and tribes bombarded militia reinforcements, causing losses in lives and equipment. Members of the terrorist Houthi militia were killed and wounded northwest of Al-Dala. According to military sources, the artillery unit targeted gatherings of the Houthi militia in Al-Mazoub area. The bombing resulted in the killing and wounding of a number of militia members and the damage of a military vehicle. Sources pointed out that a number of militia members tried to escape, but some were neutralized. Coalition fighters targeted Houthi militia command and control centers and military vehicles in Hajjah. Field military sources stated that the Saudi-led coalition fighters launched 6 air raids, targeting command and control points to weapons stores at tank and artillery positions north of the province. To the west coast, where the joint forces shot down 2 Houthi drones south of Hodeidah. Also in neighboring Taiz, a woman was killed by the explosion of a landmine planted by the terrorist Houthi militia in Haifen district south of Taiz. Coming next. Houthi militia continues its campaign to deplete education in Yemen.
اضطرينا نحن نغادر من ذي وزحنا.
الله يستنقذكم يا محويتني الله يستنقذ.
Welcome back. Yemeni children continue to suffer from the deprivation of their rights to education. Houthi militia create generations with sectarian racist ideas while transforming schools into arenas for recruiting and mobilizing children. More details on this are in the following report.
The terrorism perpetrated by the Iran-backed Houthis against children has gone beyond just physical violence. The Houthis have resorted to education to instill sectarian views in the minds of children. According to the Education Minister Tariq Salim Al-Akbari, the Houthis have altered the school curriculums, more or less turning the schools into military training camps. The minister vehemently condemned the exploitation of educational facilities, stating that the group was attempting to relay its racist, horned ideologies through school books and activities. The sectarian changes the Houthis implemented have little to do with the Yemeni identity and culture. The Houthis had reportedly added some chapters to primary education books that painted the group's founder, Hussein al-Houthi, in an overly flattering light. The Houthis' influence might regrettably bring forth a generation of extremists who would pose a threat to Yemen, the region, and the world. The indoctrination of children by the Houthis would have devastating consequences. it has the potential to bring a generation steeped in sectarianism. Activists have also voiced their concern, stating that the schools have radicalized children and pose a serious threat to their mentality and their sight. Thousands of minors have been recruited by the Houthis since the beginning of the military expansion in late 2014, according to human rights organizations, with hundreds killed in conflict last year. Lawyer Huda al-Sarari told human rights advocates in the central city of Ma'rib that 1,410 children aged 10 to 15 who had been recruited by the militia had been murdered in fighting in 2020. She went on to say that the Houthis had established 52 military outposts for indoctrinating and training youths, and that over 40,000 children had been enlisted in the battle over the last 7 years.
The U.S. Embassy in Yemen said the recent attacks of the terrorist Houthi militia by closing 6 local radio stations in the capital Sana'a reflect the deterioration of the media environment in Yemen. A message by the chargé d'affaires, Kathy Wesley, stated that she is deeply concerned about the deterioration of the freedom of the media in Yemen, which has witnessed further deterioration since the Houthi coup in 2014. She added that the suspension of work of some media outlets, the arbitrary arrest and harassment of journalists indicate a worrying trend. Transportation wages in Sana'a have risen due to the escalation of the fuel crisis by Houthi militia. Transportation fees inside Sana'a have increased by 100%, as one passenger pays 200 riyals instead of 100. According to residents, the rise in transportation costs continues despite the fact that the price of a 20-liter of gasoline is sold on the black market at prices ranging from 20 to 23,000 riyals. Houthi militia-controlled areas are witnessing a stifling crisis in oil derivatives and household gas, while the black market affiliated with influential Houthi leaders is flourishing. Aiming at spinning the wheel of economy toward resilience and stability, the EU launched a project that focuses on priorities through engaging in a constructive dialogue with public authorities. It will also improve donor coordination, which can support Yemeni economy transition from fragility to resilience. More details are in the following report.
Alleviating the economic suffering of people in Yemen is the main theme behind a recent EU project that was launched to usher the country into resilience. The EU said the project will focus on supporting building the capacity of key business associations, advocate priorities, and engage in a constructive dialogue with public authorities. It will also improve donor coordination, which can support Yemeni economic transition from fragility to resilience. The Yemeni economy lives currently the darkest days of all ages. On that, EU diplomats held talks with government officials for more constructive discussions on a longer-term support for Yemen. The EU welcomed the progress in budget preparations and encouraged further economic reforms and facilitation of development projects. This hopeful development is a pressing issue after the war has devastated the economy and destroyed critical infrastructure. The Yemeni government announced that the economic losses due to the conflict that has been going on in the country for nearly 8 years amount to more than $126 billion. Officials asserted that the loss is represented by the escalating inflation rates, the deterioration of the national currency exchange rate by more than 300%, the decline in revenues, and the deterioration of the standard of living for 80% of the population. In addition, unemployment rate rose to more than 35%, while poverty reached about 78%. Vital facilities in many fields were disrupted as a result of the destruction of a large parts of the infrastructure.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus recorded 32 new cases of the pandemic. Committee officials said 9 recovered cases and 5 deaths were recorded. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 11,420, including 2,072 deaths and 8,280 cases of recovery. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations says shortages of funding threaten providing assistance to millions of Yemenis nationwide. Recent local rights organization reveals Houthi militia violations in 2021. Government forces inflict considerable losses on rebels in Ma'rib and liberate new areas. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. This is Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.